boys screws loose, they done stripped the bolts on them. Should've never sent them to pick up the work for them. Sprayed the park and had my shit inside the car. Marcus Smart boy was shooting with a 36 on him. Said if he wasn't in the rush, they was all goners. Tech cursive on the chest, he was gonna show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuddy's Corner. This is the play-in / playoff preview episode, as it's been a couple weeks, but we are back as the regular season has come to an end. It's Tuesday, April 11th at just about 4:30 Eastern Time. I am your host, King Chuddy, a.k.a. Ben Handler, joined as always by my co-host, Nick Perino. Nick, how are we doing?
Doing all right. A little flustered. House is a mess. Just moved. Sick kid. But we're ready. It's playoff season, so to be expected.
Yeah, I mean that's what we want to hear, and I mean it's the playoffs. Nobody's 100%. We're all working through stuff, and that is what it is. I got some construction work going on in my house, so forgive the audio if anything gets picked up. But I mean, again, it's playoff basketball. We're all just working, trying to optimize whatever situation we're in, and that's where we're at. So got a lot to get into, of course. Before we get started, as always, you can download the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, Chuddy's Corner, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts and more. You can access the blog, the podcast, all our information on our blog at nickperino.com. You can find us both on Twitter. I'm at King Chuddy. Nick is at _ Nick Perino. Or at Nick _ Perino.
_ Nick Perino.
_ Nick Perino. One of these times I'll remember. And then you can follow the show at Chuddy's Corner. So definitely be ramping up during the playoffs. Already starting to mix it up on Twitter sphere. So get in there, mix it up with us. We look forward to it. Love the interaction, as always. So without further ado, like I said, tonight is Tuesday. So tonight is actually the first play-in game. The 7-8 game, which is the Heat hosting the Hawks. Now, since the Celtics are the 2 seed, this is extremely relevant, as the winner of that game will face the Celtics in round 1. They'll lock up the 7 seed. So in a few hours for us, and probably by the time you listen to this podcast, we will know the Celtics' first round opponent. We'll know who we're playing, the whole 9 yards. But first, I mean, to kind of put a bow on the regular season, a great season overall. Hard to really squabble with it too much. 57-25, good for the second best record in the NBA, right behind the Bucks, who of course are the 1 seed in the East or the 2 seed. A season of ups and downs, just flying out of the gate to a great record. We're looking like a historically great team. Everything was honky dory. Hit a little bit of a rough patch. Dealt with some injuries here and there. Kind of turned it around, got it going again, and then had really another lull where we had really probably the darkest point of the season, which I think is right around the time of our last podcast. We had that obviously epic loss to the Nets, a few other blown losses, the Grant Williams free throw game. There were a few skies falling moments, and then sure enough, Rob Williams came back. Everyone kind of got healthy, and kind of culminated with that massive blowout victory over the Bucks in kind of the last tune-up before things go. So it seems like we finished the season on a high note. I think we finished like 12-3 or something like that. The last few games were some odd lineups, obviously a lot of rest and, mixed motivation by some of the teams we're playing. But again, it seems like we're mostly clicking at the right time. I'd say playing, right up there for our best basketball of the season. So hopefully, we're where we want to be. Health, rest, but also in rhythm going into the playoffs, as now we have a week off and wait to see who we play tonight. So, before we dive in, any other real takeaways on kind of the season as a whole? It's a lot happened, but that was the extreme Cliff Notes version.
Pretty much what we've talked about all season. It was kind of a roller coaster, but I think that's what NBA seasons generally are. It's ups and downs. It's streaks. It's a long season, so I think overall I'm happy how we finished. 1 seed's nice, but I'm not really. Well, I mean, we'll get into all that, but um, I'm happy with the team. We had that little lull in the middle, but like I said, it's lulls happen, and I think ultimately we're just about where we wanted to be, healthy at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's number one. Is we've kind of both preached all year as has really the team, and I mean, again, when we started off and had whatever the greatest statistical offense in the history of basketball, it was like, okay, this is probably a little bit unrealistically high.
Mm.
And when we're, blowing a double-digit lead every game and it's the sky's falling, that's probably a little unrealistically low. But I mean, over the season ends up being 82 games. It's a pretty, generally more than almost any other sport league, is a pretty accurate sample size. And the Celtics were right there with the best or not the best team all season long. And I think that's who they are going into the playoffs. And you could, this team, they were different. It's hard, I've heard some arguments. Were they better last year? Are they better this year? I think obviously their peak last year was pretty amazing, but I think overall this is a better team, a more mature team, a more veteran team, a deeper team. And I think a team that kind of just more understands it. I mean, like you said, the number one thing last year, we were busting ass every night for half a season, largely because of the hole that we dug ourselves in the first half. But I mean, we've not to beat a dead horse because we've talked about this a lot, but I think it all kind of caught up with them. All that basketball and all that intense basketball with really no rest, no nights off, finally got to them as they battled. I know they swept the Nets, but that was a battle. Those were intense games, obviously. 7 battles against the Bucks, 7 battles against the Heat. And I think, the Warriors, they definitely kind of outclassed them and deserved to win that series. But I think a big part of it was that the Celtics just kind of ran out of gas, and especially their best players. You could see it. And again, I don't want to discredit what the Warriors did because they beat us for sure. But if you look at the Warriors, they didn't really have to grind out many series on their way as the Celtics did. And I think part of that was, they didn't load manage compared to most teams during the regular season, but it does seem like the team should be well rested, should be healthy, and really should be ready to kind of give it their all for this run we're hopefully about to go on.
And to compare last season to this season, I'd say probably the way we finished out the season was probably a little bit more balanced than either the first half of this year and last year. I mean, our peak defense last season was unmatched, and our peak offense this year was significantly better than last year. So it's like it's hard to say which team was better because one was elite defensively, one was elite offensively. We kind of saw lapses on the other end each year, but I think the way we finished this season was probably a little bit more balanced than we've been either of the last year, which I think is ultimately going to hopefully pay off once we really dig in the playoffs and have 7-game series against the same opponent where we should be able to figure things out on both ends, hopefully. So
yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and I think I think the difference too, like you said, is whereas last year we had that elite defense, I really have no reason to still believe that defense isn't there. And I hate that like flip a switch cliche, but I think the Celtics can, or I mean, I hope they can, and I have no reason to think that they can't kind of channel basically that same defense this year. Like, nobody's gotten worse at defense. It's not like anyone's got, I mean, Al's older, but he arguably looks better. He's the least of our worries. I think it is largely just locking in on that end. And like, I hate to say that we just didn't during the regular season, but that's again, kind of, it's not like we should be resting on our laurels and we've been there, done that, but I think we've seen what it takes to make it to the finals. We saw what it would take to win the finals. And part of that is probably not going all out on every defensive possession as they'll need to in the playoffs, but I have every reason to believe that they will, and that elite level defense is still there, especially with everybody healthy.
Yeah, and defense in the NBA is like 90% effort, probably. So I mean,
I don't know about 90, but I mean maybe in the regular season perhaps, but I mean I think again, I don't think like we forgot how to schematically play defense. I think, like you said, a lot of it was just not giving the fullest effort. I think guys, Smart was probably playing at less than 100%. I think a lot of guys are playing at less than 100%. Tatum and Brown are doing so much on offense. You can't probably expect them to be locked in defensive stoppers on every possession. I mean, again, the team obviously still ended up with the top 5 defense in the league. We're talking like, this is fell off to like 25th or so. I mean, again, I just think that's more of the drop in defense, I think, is more of a mirage and more explainable than like saying that the rise in the offense is a fluke. Like I think the rise on offense, I think, is sustainable, and I think is a lot due to coaching scheme and player improvement, and obviously adding a guy like Malcolm Brogdon to the second unit, stuff like that. Whereas I think the defense is a lot just not giving max effort and focus and every possession, which again, I mean, if they show up in the playoffs and don't do that, then I'll say, hey, maybe there was more to it or, whatever. But as of right now, like, I see no reason why we shouldn't go out there and have that defense. And I mean, you saw it again in that Bucks game, which was like, I would say a pseudo playoff game. Obviously the stakes weren't huge, but that had the feel of a playoff game. The rotations were like a playoff game. It was ref like a playoff game. The Bucks were on a back-to-back, but they rested guys the night before on purpose. Like they were going into that game trying to win at home, and the Celtics were unbelievable on both sides. And the defense was, I mean, Giannis was working his ass off to do anything. And he was basically, that was all he could do, was run at the basket, hope to draw a foul or kind of score inefficiently, with the Celtics saying touche, and nobody else was doing anything. And I think that was a glimpse of like the level you're going to see from the Celtics in the playoffs. And I'm not saying obviously we're going to win every game by 50 or whatever, but again, that was it was a very kind of reassuring game to see, like, okay, when we do lock in and focus, that it's still very much there on the defensive end.
Like you said, we still finished with whatever it was, top 5 defense, so it's not like we were awful. And I think the drop from last year to this year is more of just a testament to how elite we were last year. So I mean, pretty much no matter how we came out on defense this year, it was most likely going to be a drop off from where we were last year to finish the season. So I think it's probably just more obvious to most people, because I mean, if we were average on defense last year and played on defense how we did this year, people would probably be like, "Yeah, pretty good defensive year for them," and because we had a good overall defensive year. It's just nothing's going to look as good as last year how we finished the season. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm confident like you are that we should be able to pick things back up in the playoffs, and that's usually where you see teams really dig in on defenses once the playoffs start. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. Like I said, there's no reason to expect a drop off anywhere. And I mean, we'll get into specific matchups and what they could mean and this and that. And I mean, if this is headed where I think a lot of people think it's headed, with a Celtics Bucks Eastern Conference Finals, then we'll see. Like that, it looks like it could be an epic series, really, for the ages. And it's a bummer to not, I guess, have home court advantage, but at the same time, we just proved we can go in and absolutely dominate a game in Milwaukee against that team. We obviously won the biggest, when they were up 3-2, we went in last year in the playoffs and won in Milwaukee. So it is what it is. We're going to have to win a game in Pfizer Forum at some point. And, hey, whatever. We know that's the task at hand, and I wouldn't take back like the rest or anything like that. Like, yeah, there's games you could go through and be like, oh, we blew this game, we should have done this, we should have done that, whatever. But hey, it is what it is, and there's really no point in dwelling on it as of now, I don't think.
No, and you can revisionist history. You can go back and every season and look at games like that, or specific games, and be like, should have won that one, blew this one, blah blah blah. But ultimately, all that matters is you don't have those regrets in the playoffs, and you're not looking back saying we blew this one, we blew that one, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that matters. We're seemingly again peaking at the right time. This is clearly kind of how they've loosely, I think, planned it out all year, and this has been the goal, to be this healthy at this time. So it's all there for the taking. And at the end of the day, I mean, who knows? But I doubt that we're going to be sitting here at the end of the playoffs saying the difference between winning and losing the title was that we didn't have that one seed.
Yeah, no,
Right.
I agree. Yeah, no, absolutely. The one seed's not gonna be what wins or
Right.
loses us the championship this year. I don't think.
Exactly. And the Celtics are a good road team all season. And again, it's one team in the entire NBA. We make the finals, we have home court advantage. So every other team, second round, first round, home court advantage. So it's one game. We'll get through.
Yeah, and who knows? The Bulls could knock off the Bucks, and we won't have to worry about it.
Exactly. Could the Bucks? We don't know that they'll. Yeah, there's such a good chance the Bucks don't make it. So absolutely. All right. Some other just kind of like regular season takeaways. We saw Tatum become the first Celtic ever to average 30 points or more in a season. Pretty impressive stuff. Yeah. He also
all the great players we've had.
Yeah. No,
that's a 30-point score.
30 points in a season is no slouch. No, that's no joke. And I think
it's a big number, but still, like just thinking about Celtics, the history of the Celtics, and all the unbelievable players.
Absolutely, but at the same time,
you'd think someone would have done it at one point, but it's a different era.
It's a different era with the scoring for one. All the scoring numbers are kind of inflated, and also, as great as all the Celtics players have been, I don't think really their greatest players have ever been guys who you would probably consider like great scorers. Like they were great scorers, but it's not, when you think of Bird, you're not like, oh, he was such a scorer. You're thinking triple doubles and all the stuff he's doing. Like Bill Russell, you think of the rebounds, the defense, the blocks. Like we didn't have a guy who you would kind of immediately be like, yeah, that guy was just a bucket.
Yeah. Well, maybe Pierce, but.
Yeah, but the NBA, that was kind of a clunky era where I don't, And by the time the team was good, it was, we had Ray was scoring, KG was scoring, etc. Exactly. So it wasn't kind of the same. But yeah, amazing accomplishment. I think Tatum is looking like a lock to come in fourth in MVP, which, not that that's like something to hang a banner for, but that's pretty amazing at his age. He's fourth leading candidate for MVP. And frankly, I think if you go back in the history of basketball and look through a lot of seasons, it was probably an MVP caliber season. He's just going up against three really all-time guys who are ahead of him. So certainly no shame in that. He's slumped at times, even though even the stretches where he played bad, it seemed like he was averaging, 27, 8, and 5 was his like slump. Right. So he went through shooting slumps, but overall, just an amazing season from Tatum. I'd say he's as good as a lock to make first team All NBA for the second straight year. Can't say enough about the rise he's made to superstardom. I'm not sure there's really much more to say.
No, we've
everyone knows who
Jason Tatum is at this
point. Yeah. Jaylen Brown, though, his counterpoint, had some moments in this season that were for off-court reasons that were, I would say, not awesome. Nothing that I would say specifically was like bad or a red flag, but definitely some moments that probably could have gone better, at least from the eyes of Celtics fans. Some interesting comments that I don't think there was much to, but they were probably more blunt and less committal. I don't know the word, but at times he kind of cast some doubt on his future in Boston, his happiness in Boston in general. I think personally, it was more, like I said, just kind of speaking honestly about Boston, the only place he's played and stuff like that. I don't think he was really complaining or saying he wanted out or anything like that. I think he was just saying, who loves their job and their workplace and thinks everything's perfect all the time. I think he's also said, he really does like it, this and that, whatever. But anyway, at the end of the day now, he's won the Red Auerbach Award for whatever it's worth. He did an interview, saying how much he and Tatum's destinies are intertwined, this and that. And above it all, it looks like he is in very good position to make one of the 3 All-NBA teams, likely as a forward, which at that point, he would be eligible, of course, for a Supermax extension, having made All-NBA. And at that point, there's really would be no doubt, because no one who's ever been eligible for that contract and has been offered it has ever refused it. No. I don't think Jaylen, who's so involved in the players union, is going to be the first to do it. So, again, nothing's a lock, but I think making an All-NBA team would make it as close as possible to a lock that he will sign a 5-year extension and be with the Celtics for the next 6 years, which would erase what I would say was probably the biggest drama down the stretch of the season. I mean, what wasn't going on the court, I think was, again, started to be some rumblings about, is Jalen here long-term? I think making All-NBA, which it seems like he will, and which is well-deserved for the amazing season he just had, averaging, 27 points, 7 rebounds, showed improvements as a playmaker, played good defense, and I mean, was, those are absurd numbers for the second best guy, and there were a lot of nights where he was the best guy. He stepped it up. So I mean, and it was very availability. He played through some injuries, but played in a lot of games. And I think if he makes a second or third team All NBA, very well deserved. And he will very much deserve that max contract. That should all but cement the Jays in Boston for a long, long time to come.
And it was a brilliant move by the Celtics for giving him the Auerbach Award. I mean, clearly, I don't know if he was just hyping it up. I mean, he really seemed to be, thankful for that. And it seemed to be something that he actually valued.
I think so.
And that's part of the whole thing that everyone's always talking about is like, does Jalen feel like he's important here? Or does he feel like a second fiddle to Jason Tatum, which,
Well, and those are kind of the quotes I was referencing where he didn't specifically say that he didn't feel valued. He just said that he wanted to be somewhere where he felt valued as he's coming up with free agency. And like you said, was the second fiddle to Tatum thing. There were rumblings that, he didn't love seeing his name constantly out there in trade rumors. It said Brad and Tatum shot that down as soon as he talked to them. But still, I think he had reasons to question his worth. And I agree with what you're saying. It seems the Celtics down the stretch especially have tried to almost go a little out of their way with things like the Auerbach Award. Brad gave kind of an impromptu press conference and campaigned for Jalen to make All NBA, things like that, where, I think they are kind of making that little extra step to show him how much he's valued and appreciated. But at the end of the day, that, Supermax check they hand him will be really the only showing of his value and appreciation that should and likely will matter.
It's easy to forget about any sort of gripes you may have once there's like an extra $100 million on the table or whatever it is.
Exactly. And I think people forget too that he is not on a rookie max. Like, we got him for what is now an obscene discount. If you remember at the time, he didn't quite qualify, didn't quite get offered that full rookie max. So he's really been on a team friendly deal, really ever since he was drafted. So again, kind of something people probably don't think about as much, but I'm sure Jalen thinks about it and is very well aware that he's been fairly underpaid.
Yeah, he'll get his.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the thing with the Jays. Derek White is going to be the third guy I bring up as just what an incredible season. He seems like has a very, very good chance to make one of the all defensive teams with the season he's had, and he's really been a revelation on offense too. He's been the guy with the kind of amazing on-off numbers, plus minus, all that. White has been a revelation this year, and it seems like when he plays a lot, the Celtics win. So, it'll definitely be very interesting to see how his minutes are kind of managed in the playoffs, how the rotations are managed. Good problem to have, but I really think he deserves a shout out for an incredible regular season. Played in every single game too. The only guy on the team, one of, a handful of guys in the league who did that. So in this kind of era of basketball, that's pretty amazing. And he just did it all. Like I said, he would bounce, some nights he was scoring, some nights he was assisting, some nights he's locking down. He's always locking down on defense, but he's taking charges. He's blocking shots. What a perfect role player. And going back a year for what we gave up, almost nothing, really, a very, very late first round pick, Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, whatever, to have ended up with Derek White and what, now looks like a value contract with him, and how well he's just fit now that he's fully kind of ingrained in this team. Hard to overstate really what he's become and how important for, again, something that when people are comparing the seasons, they're looking, well, we had White last year, we have White this year, but like the Derek White we have now and his kind of comfort level and familiarity with everything we're doing and how well he's playing is night and day from what he was last year. even when he was good last year. But now he's more than good.
Hey, you can't say enough about the season he had and how valuable he's been to this team. Um, he's been the guy he's been more than the guy that was advertised, obviously. And I think um, one of the biggest things that people didn't really expect was his 3-point shooting, which it's not like he's been a terrible 3-point shooter through his career, but that's probably been one of the especially last year for the Celtics. I mean, it was not a good start to his 3-point career as a Celtic, and I think that's probably where that's one of the stats that are pretty glaring for especially people that aren't
Mm-hmm.
more of the casuals are like, you can't hit a three, blah blah blah. The whole
Right.
the Marcus Smart crowd, the Marcus Smart hater crowd. But he shot 38% this year. I mean, he was like a
Yeah,
borderline. He was
absolutely.
a
And
very good 3-point shooter, and I mean that kind of helped him open up his game on offense. And
definitely.
um,
It's opened up
he's
everything,
just
but I mean, his
yeah.
driving and his movement, like he just plays so fast. It's the ball touches his hands and he's in motion. He never is really catching standing still. He's like catching on the run.
Mm-hmm.
He's already making the next pass or he's shooting. And I think you and I actually talked about it. I remember having the conversation when we were kind of analyzing the trade deadline last year and what his role would be. And I think it took about a year to figure out. But one of the things we mentioned at the time was that for the Spurs, he was in a very ball dominant role. Often was one of the lead creators and one of the lead scorers on what wasn't a good Spurs team for a lot of his career there. I think once he got to Boston, I mean, it took him a while, but he's figured out, like, to most defenses, fair or not, he's an afterthought, especially when he's playing with Tatum and Brown, even one of those guys. Like, the way he moves, he just has to kind of figure out how to move off them, and he's figured that out. And it's so many of his threes. He's catching and shooting in rhythm and almost wide open all the time. So like you said, he can easily shoot 40% from threes when they're all great looks. And he almost never has to shoot one that isn't a great look. So it's like with everything else he has now, he can just run around and, just find his spots and walk into open threes like nonstop. And he has fully learned how to play with these other guys. And it's been awesome to watch.
Yeah, he's fully embraced the role of playing off of superstars, which is what we needed. And like you said, what we've been saying is we need people like around Jalen and Jason who, when given the opportunity or when, one of the Jays draws, 2 or 3, that he's going to be in the right place and he's going to make the right decision, which is either, like you said, catch and shoot or catch and move the ball, make the right pass, or go to the hoop. And I'm pretty much confident with the ball in his hands under like any circumstance, really. I mean, he's been good around the hoop. He's got that little, he has that little, mid-range floater that he pulls out once in a while, and then he's got the 3, which has been great. And I don't know. I mean, you put him, he's probably good enough to be, he's definitely good enough to be a starter. We've seen it in the past, but I mean,
He ended up starting more games than not this year because of, a lot of different reasons. But yeah, he's more than a capable NBA starter, obviously.
And if he's sort of the when you look at players who are like, oh, I want to be a starter, and rightfully so, a lot of people do. But if you're good and you play hard and you play the right way, you're gonna get a lot of minutes. And I mean, he's averaged like 28 minutes a game, so it's not like he's playing 15 and 20 minutes. If you play well and you're available and you're doing what's asked of you, you're gonna contribute heavily to the team, and you're gonna get good minutes, and you're gonna have an opportunity to show how good you are. And I think it was a good sort of role model for some of the other players or younger players that maybe don't get as many minutes, where it's like, just stick to what you do and do what's asked of you, and you'll get your time to shine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Speaking of guys who aren't starting, Malcolm Brogdon, who is the new big offseason acquisition, and is, I'd say, at this point, about a coin flip with Emmanuel Quickly to win Sixth Man of the Year. I don't know. These awards, like, it's tough to argue, and I think it's interesting that a lot of the argument has become the fact that Quickly Quickly's stats are massively juiced because of he started about a quarter of the games, and in those games he's putting up monster numbers. But if you take just his bench numbers, they're considerably worse. So this is kind of like an eye of the beholder thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if he wins. I mean, it might matter to some people, but it doesn't really matter to me or to us or the Celtics whether he wins or not. But the fact is, Malcolm Brogdon was one of the best bench players in the league all year. He really solidified the Celtics bench and brought an element, especially on offense, that this team just didn't have. And that's, another huge change from last year's team where the offense really shouldn't stagnate because we have a guy off the bench now who's so elite at getting to the basket, so elite at shooting threes. Just an awesome offensive player, really all around him. I mean, and again, you saw it I keep referencing that big Bucks game where we absolutely smoked him. Brogdon was a big part of that. He's just such a tough matchup. Like, they don't have that many, they have good defenders, but he's just he poses a problem for them. And he was eating alive the drop coverage. He was getting to the basket, laying the ball in at will. Obviously, that's his former team. So I think bringing a little extra to it, but again, just another awesome trade by Brad. And he's been a huge fit, and I'm sure he'll have big playoff moments, but it seems like they've kind of managed his minutes, his rest perfectly. And again, just a perfect fit. It's a perfect addition to this team.
I think when we traded for him, it was basically, we were like, this is exactly what we needed. Seeing how things ended in the finals, we were like, we need a guy that can just come in and be a bucket off the bench or just a secondary scorer behind the Jays. Because we didn't really have that. I mean, we have like people that can score around him, but we didn't have any real true scorers, and that's what he's turned out to be. And I think it's even probably more pronounced his role as just primarily a scorer, more so than probably we expected. Because in the past he's been, point guard, and he's run the offense and distributed and whatnot, and he's capable of doing that, obviously. But it's clear that what he's been told is to go out there and score points, and he's done just that. Obviously, I mean, he's like you said, he gets to the hoop and he finishes. He's 44% from three this year, which is just unbelievable. He's efficient. He's doing everything we need him to do, and then it's nice to see how much he's embraced his role too, because.
It's easy, right? It's easy to say you're going to come in and do what the team needs, but it's another thing to do it.
And I mean, you look at like the previous 4 years. Obviously, he wasn't super healthy, but I mean, he started every single game. He was healthy. He started. And then you look at this year, 67 games, zero games started. So it's like he obviously wasn't harping, to come, days where we were shorthanded. He wasn't like, give me the start, blah blah blah. He was like, stick to my role, stay comfortable what he's doing, and that's what he did. It's just it's a good guy to have in your team.
Definitely, and I think it's also easy to it's easy to embrace your smaller role when your smaller role is still just like go out and be the offense. His role was like go get the ball and score. So if he's playing in the starting lineup with Tatum and Brown, that's not going to be his role, right? Like that's not really the same. White's role is kind of different. Brogdon's role is like, okay, everyone's tired, you go in and just like score points. Yeah, that's a fun role. Like I think that's what everyone wants to hear. Oh, you just want me to drive and shoot as much as I want? Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean that's like the ultimate six-man dream. I mean it's like
but no one would ever think of him as well. I was just to say like no one would ever think of Brogdon before this year as the kind of player as like a Jamal Crawford, a Lou Williams, like just come in and score. But he's proven that he's amazing at it.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of thing I was talking about earlier, where it was like, you're not the primary, focal point as like maybe they have been on recent teams, but if you come in, you do what asked of you and play hard and, fit into your role, you're going to get minutes. And just like Derek White, he got a bunch of minutes. He contributed heavily on this team throughout the year. Was, both of them. There were games where they were our best player. It wasn't.
Definitely.
It wasn't often. But
no, it's plenty. Yeah,
and
definitely stretches of games where they use, which is really what we need too. We're not asking him to be the best player for the game, but if he can be the best player for 8 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
that's game changing compared to last year or last few years, especially.
So Brad, 2 for 2 on those moves. A plus.
Absolutely. I mean, that really were like perfect moves, especially when you look around at like the NBA landscape and, the price of what it costs now. And you got, I'm not saying like OG and Anunoby or Mikal Bridges are necessarily not as good as like White and Brown. They're definitely like sexier names, but the fact that those guys, teams were turning down 3 first-round picks for them is like what the market is now for these kind of like star role players. And we got these like out of nowhere quiet deals that were just like, boom. I mean, remember at the time people were like, oh, I can't believe we gave the Spurs a pick swap in like 2028. And now it's like teams are just giving out first round picks. Like you can't buy, you can't even buy role players. So 3 first round picks is crazy.
And it's kind of this part of the refreshing part of Brad where, Danny, obviously all the great things he's done was a little bit more, we've talked about it. He's been a little bit more stingy with his first round picks. And, you get to the trade deadline and like you said, people want 2 first rounders for OG. But you look where we made the Brogdon move, it was out of nowhere. It was just like a, sleepy Saturday or whatever it was. And all of a sudden
it was
the
like
news
right
breaks
before free agency started, I think. Maybe on the first day even, I forget.
So you strike when the iron's hot. If someone comes up and is like, hey, this is what it will take to get it done. And it seems like, you get a good player and sometimes you give up a first, sometimes you give up some players. But I mean, luckily, these deals that we've made, it's pretty much just been a first. I mean, the guys that we've given up, obviously we like and whatnot, but I don't think we're going to be kicking ourselves for losing Romeo and Josh Richardson and Neesmith or whatever. So,
Well, and even if they do someday become great players, like they're just, it's our time is now, theirs is not.
Right. If we win a championship,
we got players
we're not gonna...
in Brogdon and White who are ready to in their primes now, which is what we need.
If we win a championship when those two contribute, we're not gonna be kicking ourselves if Romeo's an all-star in 2 years.
Wow. Can you imagine if Romeo's an all-star in 2 years? Now, I don't know. I might be kicking. That would be just amazing.
I'd be bummed, but we'd still have a championship.
Yeah, no, for sure. Of course. But all right. I don't want to go through every single player on the roster. I felt those guys in awards contention deserve some mention. I think Al is just Mr. Do-It-All, continues to not age and seemingly get better as time goes on. He's just rock solid, kind of like Tatum. There's almost nothing to say. He's just as awesome and reliable as it gets. And the few times this year where he channeled playoff Al, you saw that it's still there. I'm just so excited for him. And it's just, again, like another guy, I just can't overstate how much he means to the team and just how awesome he still is at this age. Like, who'd have thunk it?
I don't know what he shot from 3, but I felt like he was
up there for the league lead for a lot of the year. I think he fell off a little bit down the stretch, but no, I mean, he was money all year.
Oh, wow, finished about almost 45%.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Jesus.
Unreal. Yeah, I mean, like I said, can't say enough about Al. Just an amazing player, and we know he'll step it up in the playoffs on both ends. We'd be screwed without him. It's amazing. Our other
look at
big
these 3-point percentages from some of these players. And at what point do we start getting drug tested?
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, that's what happens when you play off 2 super elite players. That makes a lot of open shots for the guys around them, and they've just been hitting open shots. So, Rob, obviously, huge X factor, as we've seen the difference when he doesn't play this year, especially down the stretch. I mean, Rob, there'll kind of always be the but, or if this, but he's healthy now. He looks good. They've definitely kept the training wheels on him all year. And I mean, again, like you said, it's definitely frustrating, but if he can play his best and stay healthy for this run, the rest of it doesn't matter. So right now he's healthy. At any given moment, we could be having an emergency podcast to talk about his latest lower body injury. So, I mean, that
knock on wood.
it's kind of the Rob Williams experience at this point. That's why we were able to sign him to such a good deal. But I mean, at the end of the day, when he's on the court, he's still one of the biggest difference makers in the league at that position. Brings an element that just can't be accounted for. So yeah, I mean, I think he did what he needed to this season, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what he needed to do this season was be healthy for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's essentially yes. He seems like he came back, got his legs under him, and should be ready to go and well rested. So, like you said, that's really.
I mean, if he didn't play a minute all season and was healthy for game one of the playoffs, I'd say a little disappointing, but that's all we really wanted. So.
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, again, there's really not much else to say about Rob. Grant had a very up and down season for a contract year. A lot of down, but at the end of the day, I think he still kind of had his moments, and I think he still is kind of a guy I trust. I don't want him taking the last shot, especially if it's a free throw. But, for his role, I still trust him. He still brings a kind of edge to this team in a weird way, and I think he's going to have a playoff moment. He's back in the rotation, I think, and, playing his role, and it's an important one. We're going to need him, and I still kind of trust him to come through when the chips are down in a weird way, which maybe is foolish, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there were times at the beginning of the year where he looked awesome. Like, oh, is this guy going to get a max contract? And
I'm not sure I remember those moments. But...
You don't remember the max contract talks? So I think he kind of maybe got a little bit ahead of himself where he's like, I'm playing great. I have more to offer. And then maybe he tried to start expanding his game a little bit. And that's kind of when he got, when things kind of went sideways for him, I think. And, he tried to do too much. What he's great at is playing his role, which was, hitting corner threes, playing solid defense, making the right plays. But, then there were a lot of pump fakes and him, trying to get shots off the ball. And
for sure.
At points it was frustrating. It's not like he can't do that. I mean, there were some games where where he had a contested three and he'd pull the ball back and, make a couple dribbles, get to the hoop. And it was like, oh, that was nice. And I mean, that's when you should do it. You shouldn't be trying to create your own shot. And I think maybe he was playing for a contract at points.
I think there were definitely times where he was feeling himself a little too much. And I think a lot of those times too, people forget some of those biggest moments. Like, I think the problem for Grant is when people think about his season, like the things that are going to stick out are obviously the missed free throws against Cleveland. Obviously the turning the ball over on the last possession against the Bucks. Things like that. But again, those games, he was in those moments because we were sitting half our team, and he was like those just aren't really realistic positions for him to be in games that matter, I guess. So it's almost like, well, what do you want him to do? He's out there with guys who, if you look at who's on the floor, like he has just as much right as these guys to be trying to make this play, and he fell short, but that's why he's a bench role player. Like, I don't know. I don't think in the playoffs he's suddenly going to be like, I got this, guys, clear out. So I don't know. Like I said, I still trust him. He's always been kind of matchup dependent, but I think there are a couple matchups we'll very possibly see where he'll play a huge role, and I'm comfortable with that.
Yep. Hopefully he'll get his free throw stroke back. But I mean, last year he shot 90%.
He was shooting almost 90%, I think, going into that Cavs game, and since then he's shooting like 47%.
Yeah, so he's taking a hit.
He's got the yips. He's got the yips from the line, but again, he's not. I don't know. I don't think we're at the point where a team's going to go hack a Grant in mid game. I don't think so. And otherwise, he just doesn't go to the line a lot. So
he's turned into like a borderline elite 3-point shooter. So
yeah,
I mean that's for someone who missed their first blood, he missed his first 27 threes of his career or something, didn't he?
Yeah.
And now he's consistently shooting around 40%. That's
absolutely.
That's that's what he is. He's 3-point corner specialist and defender and guy that makes smart plays, and I think ultimately that's what he's going to do in the playoffs. He's going to get back into that role, and he's going to do what's asked of him.
Yeah, I would agree. Then we had kind of the emergence of Sam Hauser this year, our 3-point marksman. When he plays and hits shots, this team is almost unstoppable. It's kind of a weird correlation like that. Just the way it's almost been like a statistical anomaly, but he's been great at times. I think, again, he's a guy who I think will factor into the playoff rotation. I think he's earned some opportunities. I'm not sure if it'll be kind of a steady every game role, but I think there will definitely be some times where Joe gives Sam a chance. And also, same thing. I have some confidence, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a random, 5 threes for Hauser game. I think he's fully capable, and I think it's just another nice dimension to have off this bench that we don't need him, but he's done well enough on defense where I'm not like scared of him just getting targeted every possession. And he's shown enough on offense, and he's obviously a knockdown shooter. So like, I think he's actually carved out a role. I think he's going to be part of the rotation in the playoffs for the most part. Again, not, every game, and especially maybe as we go on, but I think there's a role for him, and I feel pretty good about that.
I think you're underselling his defense a little bit. I don't know if you're aware. He had the best defensive net rating in the league or something, was it?
Yeah, that's a team stat. So
basically,
I'm going to ignore that tweet.
Basically, best defender in the league. If you
not an individual statistic. Should not be used in that manner.
but yes,
No, but even the eye test, because teams look at him and are like, yeah, switch me onto him all year. And he just steadily was solid. Like, he really is not a liability.
He's not a liability.
On that. No, he's fine. He more than held his own. And I think it was almost to our detriment that teams would think that, because they're trying to almost force shots in a matchup that's really not that favorable, and it played to our advantage.
Oh yeah, and that's
so we'll see. I mean, the right guy could target him in the playoffs. Talk to me a week from now when Jimmy Butler is going at him 8 plays in a row and gets played off the floor. Like, it could happen, but I think, like I said, I think he's at least earned a real chance.
Yeah, I mean, he could be targeted, by certain players, but I think that's pretty much
most people can.
Right. But the point is that he proved he's
become a real guy, a
defensive liability, and that's all we really want.
Yeah,
he can play
one of the best movement shooters in the NBA.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been asking from him.
Yeah,
all season, which is just be a guy that can.
Yeah,
that's like
and it's what we've been asking the Celtics to have for like 5 years.
Yeah,
if not more.
We've been talking about it all season, where he's not a guy that's like a focal point of your rotation or whatever. He's a guy that you hope he can come in for a stretch in the playoffs and just come off the bench and hit 3 threes in a row, and all of a sudden you're up double digits. And but if he comes in and he misses a few threes, it's not going to kill you. It's like, it's basically an all upside type of player, which is what we wanted. Just a sharpshooter that can come off and just rip off a few threes. If he doesn't have it that night, then no big deal. He just doesn't play. And
right. Yeah.
It's valuable to have a guy like that.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, I think
not going to win or lose you a championship, but it's could make things easier.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Good way to put it. Beyond that, I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's really going to make a huge difference in the playoffs. We had Peyton Pritchard obviously put up that outrageous 30-point triple-double in the final game of the regular season with a lot of people resting. I think we could see, we'll obviously see a lot of Pritchard hopefully in mop-up duty, especially in the first few rounds. I think there could be a time where the team needs a spark or needs, his specific skill set, shooting, ball handling, pushing the ball, pressuring full court, whatever. I could see him thrown into a game as like a change of pace, but I mean, he's certainly not going to be in the rotation. We just have too many basically good guards ahead of him. Then we've got, Muscala we traded for midseason. He's shown flashes, and I think that's a guy who, if Grant is off or Hauser's not hitting, like, I think we could go to Muscala in certain matchups. And same thing, like, he has shown that he can get hot and hit 3 straight threes at any time. So I wouldn't be shocked if we get a Muscala moment in a playoff game, but he's not going to be a regular part of the rotation. I mean, same goes for Cornette. And beyond that, I mean, the only guy I haven't mentioned is Smart, because he's smart,
Right.
We know what we're getting there.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I'm glad Pritch got a chance to
yeah,
showcase himself now
yeah,
at Tampa.
absolutely. And I
But
mean,
yeah,
that's nothing we didn't know he was capable of. But again, his biggest problem is just the team is
well,
kind of stacked at his position.
I'm not sure I knew he was capable of 30 points
Maybe
triple
not that.
doubles,
Maybe
but
not that much. Maybe he didn't know he's capable of quite that much. But I think we all know that if given the keys to an offense, he's going to put up numbers and make plays
right,
and score points.
exactly. Yep.
Yep. So I mean, then that leaves us with really just the front office and the coaching. So where are we at on Joey Maz? I think another guy who has had his ups, his downs, but at the end of the day, first year head coach, one of, if not the youngest coach in the league at this point. I think he was. Led his team to a 57-25 record. A lot of good, especially, cleaned up the offensive end. Seemingly, just a really strong voice for the team. We make fun of his crazy eyes, his gum chewing that he quit, some of his lack of timeouts, and some of his comments in the postgame. But I think, we need to be realistic with what we're looking for. And I think he's gotten better as the year went on, and he's adjusted. He's changed some of the things that annoyed us, and overall, I think he's had a good year, and I feel good about him, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, he proved to be, well, I think he proved to be a very good rookie head coach. And, keyword being rookie, where there was some growing pains. And I think he was a guy that's obviously well respected around the league, and this locker room respects him. Um, but he had a few hiccups in here and there, growing pains, which is expected of a guy who's, he was coaching what, D2 a couple of years ago or something.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, it's.
he was
I mean, he's been on the Celtics bench obviously for a few years, but
right, but it's
as an
like
assistant.
he has come from,
Mm-hmm.
he's come up quick through the system. Basically, what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say. And I mean, like I said, he's well respected around the league, but I think people are saying he was probably 2 or 3 years away from like
yeah,
real head coaching
right.
consideration. And
Having the
considering,
respect
the
of the players and the respect of your peers is part of it, but there's a lot
yeah,
more that goes into it.
exactly. Yeah. And I think he's, given the situation he was thrown into, he's done an excellent job.
Yeah,
So I'm glad, I'm glad it was him. We obviously had a bunch of names floating around in the
definitely.
off season, but ultimately I think it was, it looks like it was the right hire. And um, let's just see what happens in the playoffs now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you have any reservations? Is there any part of you that's like nervous that he could ultimately cost us? Or, I mean, what?
Uh, no, I don't think so. I mean, there's always that possibility.
But well,
With,
no, but no reason to
a
think him
rookie
more
head
than
coach. No,
in general.
no,
Yeah,
I haven't seen anything that really is like, throughout the season where it's like he has the potential to blow a series for us. I mean,
yeah, no,
obviously,
I,
players,
I don't think the players
the
would let him. I think we have too many
right,
good play. Like I don't know. I think the overall maturity of the locker room, the players, the organization as a whole, and like the kind of continuity, all of those things help kind of account for and allow the lack of experience for the head coach. Whereas, if
yeah,
you put in, if Joe Maz's first job was coaching this year's Rockets team,
right,
I don't know if people would be loving the results, but I think it works given kind of the rest of the team and how many of the guys feel like they're almost like coaches on the floor at this point. I mean,
right,
you know, there aren't a lot of young, immature people he has to manage. Let's put it that way.
exactly. It was
He gets to
it
focus
made
on
sense for
basketball.
him. It's a good situation, pretty good situation for him, obviously, and you know, the players obviously approved of it. So
Yeah,
that's half the battle is making sure the players
yeah,
approve of the coach.
definitely. I think he could whiff a top 3 coach of the year. I think he could
Yeah,
make it on the final list. So, and that would be well deserved for sure. So, good for him. I mean, I don't think we have to talk much about Brad. I don't know. He probably won't get executive of the year just because the team was already obviously really good last year, and that's just kind of how it works. But
hmm
I think we've kind of mentioned at every turn. Really, seemingly every move he's made has been a net positive. So he just continues to know what he's doing and be one of the few competent guys running an NBA team. So thank goodness for that. The whole transition period of a few years ago between Ainge, Stevens, the coaches, etc. Really, we couldn't be in a much better place for it. It seems like at this point. So, be grateful, Celtics fans.
Yeah, I think Minnesota front office has executive of the year locked up probably. So
yeah, exactly. Definitely. Hard to argue with that one. All right. Any other, regular season stuff that I missed? Maybe specifics? Anything specific? Player, game, narrative, whatever that you think deserves touching on?
no, I don't think so. I mean,
We can go
we've
back and
pretty
lament
much
more at a later date, do our report cards, things like that. But
right.
I think for this team, as we've known kind of from even long before the season started, it really is all comes down to what they do now in the playoffs.
Exactly.
So
This is where the real report card starts.
Exactly. So, on that note, as I mentioned, tonight is the first play-in game. The Miami Heat are hosting the Atlanta Hawks. We will play the winner of that game. I think the Heat, last I checked, were favored by 6-7 points, something like that at home.
Sounds right.
Seems like a lot. Should be an interesting game. The Heat have a pretty elite defense, as we know, and almost at times unwatchable offense. If you haven't been paying attention, are they the same old Heat? Maybe in the personnel wise, they've obviously still got Spo coaching them. They've still got Jimmy. They've got Bam. Heroes had a nice year, but usually the Heat are reliable for these kind of random role players who just come in and kill you. That has not been the case this year. They have had such a hard time finding really any support. The Lowry trade and contract have looked really bad. The guys, the Duncan Robinsons and Struces of the world that just haven't been able to play, haven't been able to hit shots. That team's been dreadful in offense, one of the worst shooting teams in the league. But play great defense. They still, like I said, have Spo. They've got Butler. They've got Bam. And they just kind of, have that bravado about them. So they're a bit of a wild card, I think it's fair to say, at the very least. We've seen them do it before on some level. So there's that. The Hawks, kind of the opposite. They've had mostly a very good offense, despite Trey having a bad shooting year. It's been kind of wonky. Losing Herter has hurt them, I think, more than they thought. The DeJounte bit has been kind of weird. They have not been very good on defense, but here they are. So it should be an interesting matchup. The Celtics were 2-2, I think, against Miami with an overtime loss and kind of another weird one. No real games in a while. They were 3-0 against the Hawks, one of those being that final day of the season where Pritchard went off and nobody else really relevant played. So I guess let's just start. What are you expecting in that game tonight? What do you think's going to prevail?
I'm seeing 5-point favorites right now.
5. Okay. That sounds about right.
6.5 on Barstool if you want to if you like the Hawks. So between obviously I think most Celtics fans are probably on the same page as far as we'd like to see the Hawks probably over the Heat just because of the history. And the coaching, Spo obviously knows how to muck things up. And it seems like regardless of how poorly the Heat play over the course of a season, they have the ability to make things interesting. And the playoffs are, series. And, they're probably not a real threat to win at any point, but, they know how to make things difficult. They still have some good players. And on paper Atlanta's probably better, but I think we're probably more confident watching. I think we'd be happy to see the Hawks take down Miami. And if I'm predicting what's going to happen, I still think if I were a betting man, I'd probably take Miami in this one.
Yeah.
They're 5-point favorites, so it's not like it's. I think people are. No, I don't think anyone's expecting a blowout, but I just think they're more battle tested. They have good defenders, and if Trey is going to be, a poor man's version of Trey, then I don't really think they have a chance against anybody.
Yeah, I mean,
And
he's averaged
they have
27
some
and
good
10.
players,
It's not like he's
right? It's
but
not like he's been a bum, but I mean, for the
yeah,
Hawks to win games, Trey needs to be,
the shooting has
you
been
know,
bad, which is weird, especially a
yeah,
three-point shooting, but
yeah.
yeah, I
So
mean, I don't know. It's a play-in game for a reason. I think both of these teams are hard to trust. But I mean, again, when it comes down to a game like this, you trust the experience, you trust the clutch guys, the tougher team, and the team that defense, all the cliches about defense. You want to trust the team with the defense. So, I mean, everything kind of points to Miami. They're at home. That's why they're favored. All these reasons, that kind of you just outlined and that are kind of obvious. Having said that, we just talked about how bad Miami's been this year. They're the worst team in the NBA against the spread. But obviously far better straight up. So it kind of shows they've just been like disappointing, but they do just grind out these wins. But at the same time, they could just show up and score 85 points, and the Hawks could have one good game. That's kind of the fun of these playing games. So, I mean, I'd say even if you give the Heat a 65% chance, like anything could happen.
right,
I don't, they haven't, I don't know. If your trust is obviously a very strong word, but if you trust the Heat, like you really feel good about it, you're mostly basing that on past performance and not what's happened this year.
for
It's
sure.
based on this year, and almost anything could happen tonight. And well, I agree with what you said that the Heat are better. They're a better team. They have guys who scare me more individually. They have a scarier coach, although Quinn Snyder is obviously a good coach now in Atlanta. All of that stuff is true, but I would not be shocked at all if they lay an egg or if the Hawks just play well and beat them. It's not a 50-50 proposition, but it's also not too far from that, I don't think. Even though historically this hasn't been a great matchup for Atlanta. They've kind of had a tough time getting Trey going and others against this defense. But it's one game. Neither team's great. Well, anything could happen.
Yeah, that's why the play-ins are so much fun.
Yeah, it will. It should be a fun night, a fun couple of nights. Now, that's, what'll happen is what'll happen. But I guess, do you have a strong preference of who wins? Who would you rather play, and is it a strong feeling of who you'd rather play, and I guess why, beyond what you've already outlined?
I mean, I definitely would rather play the Hawks. And I think, we've pretty much touched on it all, but, in the playoffs, Miami's put up a good fight against us because of all the things that we've listed.
Say the least.
Coach, yeah, the coaching, the grit, the battle test.
Mm-hmm.
They have a little bit of everything. They're not an elite offense, but they don't need to be because of the way they play defense and the way
They're the
they
opposite of an elite offense, for the record.
right. They muck
They're
things
an
up.
awful offense. Yeah.
So that's just
Yeah.
it's the obvious thing. I think it's pretty much what most Celtics fans, their PTSD from the last few years of playing the Heat
Right.
in the playoffs. I think it's and I mean the Hawks. I just don't think scare anyone really, and it's maybe it's just not their year, obviously, and they have a good roster and a good coach, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not. I don't know. They don't scare me, and it's not like I don't want to say the Heat scare me, but they scare me more than Atlanta. And there's not much I can put on it, like you said, other than past performance, which is
Yeah.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm basically on the same page. I would rather, give me my choice, I'd rather play the Hawks. Whereas you said, maybe like the talent between the two teams is not very different, but it's the Hawks. You know exactly what they are. They're predictable. Really, the only way they could ever possibly beat the Celtics, even in one game, is to just play really well and really fast and outscore them. And I just don't think there's any chance they could outscore the Celtics even at their best, for a 7-game series. Like, they just don't concern me. We can shut them down. We could score on them at will. That would be, a cakewalk. That would be great. Miami, on the other hand, is tougher because, like you said, do you believe what happened this year, that they are that bad, that will cakewalk them? Maybe. And as a Celtics fan, I'm not sure. There wouldn't be many things as fulfilling as just beating the absolute shit out of the Heat. Like,
Sure.
it would be fun to play them and just crush them in 4 straight and be like, yeah, no, you guys are not who you think you are at all. We're not scared of you. Nobody's scared of you. You guys are fake tough guys. Go back to Miami. Like, see ya. That would
Definitely would be fun to break their
awesome.
will and
Yeah.
blow the team up next year. So
exactly, like sweeping the Heat to start a playoff run would be about as sweet as it gets.
right.
But we got that last year with the Nets, and our path proved to be ultimately too tough. Whether that was just because of whatever that we didn't play the matchups, who knows? But we've done that. We've been there, done that. We don't have to prove stuff like that. I would rather get the easiest path possible and just get to the finals or the conference finals, get whatever, just advance as easily as possible. The Hawks are just a more clear advance. And like you said, the Heat, even if their offense can't get going, they muck it up. They can do that. And that style, whether it's the Heat or other teams, is what's kind of frustrated the Celtics and taken them out of their game. We stoop to their level. We slow it down. I mean, that's their whole goal. Slow it down and hope that they can win a game like 95-92. And they've done it. And they can do it for a game or two in a series. And suddenly you're looking at game 6 and you're like, well, how the hell is this happening? It's basically exactly what happened in the series last year. Now, they were a better team. We were a worse team. Whatever you want to say, they had home court. There's a lot of reasons to think it could be different. But again, we just know that that's there. We've seen them do it to us this year in the regular season. It's just annoying. I hate watching those games. They drive me crazy. They just don't die. They're just an annoying team to watch. So as much as I would love to just smoke them, I'd rather just avoid them, let them be somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
I would love for the Hawks to win tonight and see them kind of unleash that annoyance on the Bucks. Like, ultimately, they don't scare me. And I don't think that Celtics fans and casuals should be as scared as they probably are because of the names, this and that. Like, the Heat just haven't been good this year. And I think that Celtics would ultimately probably beat them in 5 games. But those 5 games would be so fucking annoying. And it's just like mental and physical damage that you don't need to worry about if you're playing the Hawks. Like, I'm not saying the Hawks would be like regular season status, but it would be a lot closer to like, okay, we don't have to fully ramp up into top gear. The Heat, at least I think we know, would make us turn into top gear. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's enough for me to choose. So if the Heat win tonight and it's the Heat, so be it. There's absolutely no excuse not to crush them. But we'd have to exert, I think, a lot more mental and physical energy to beat the Heat. And as is proven last year and, in general, the least amount of energy we can exert, especially before we ultimately have to, because we know at some point it's coming, I would love to just avoid it. So I don't want to play those annoying bastards from Miami, not because I'm scared of them, because they just piss me off.
And even the wins against Miami takes years. They
don't feel good, and they never feel good.
No. And yeah, even when you win, it's like, why? And it's a close game, and it was frustrating. It's like, why was it so difficult? Are we not that good? And you start to question yourself and the team. But yeah, no. I think also being the best teams on the way to a championship is very.
It sounds cool. It sounds cool.
It sounds great.
10 years later, you're not reminiscing on the path it took to get there.
Yeah, we're not going to get an asterisk because we played the Hawks in the first round. So
yeah,
I think
exactly.
I'd like to, like you said, let's get the easiest path there. Let's stay fresh. Let's sweep 4 series in a row and hang the banner.
Right. And I mean, especially we already talked about we missed on the 1 seed. So we're probably going to have to, almost certainly it's going to be Philly and then Milwaukee in the 2nd and 3rd round, who are possibly along with us, the other 2 of the 3 best teams in the NBA in whatever order you have them. So there's going to be plenty of, we're not going to get the, like the Red Sox win where you got Felger and Maz going, they haven't played anyone after they've won. Like, it's not going to be that no matter what, I can assure you. And if it is, great. I don't care. Give me upsets. Let's play Atlanta, the Knicks and the Bulls en route to the
Love
Timberwolves in the
that.
finals. Like, I don't care. Let us sweep all teams who had a losing record. I will not feel one iota worse about winning the championship. There are no style points. I don't care for the record. So to me, I'm with you. Like, so overrated. I hope the Bucks lose in the first round and we don't have to play them. I'm not like, oh, it won't be legit if we don't go through Milwaukee. Like, no way.
Not how it works.
No way do I feel that way. No way should anyone feel that way. Again, it's not that I'm scared of them or think that we can't beat them, but I'd rather not if we don't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe if the Bulls or the Raptors or the Hawks can beat the Bucks and that's who we play, I'm even happier.
Yeah, I mean, Giannis's path to a championship had some holes in it, and he still gets credit for it. So
yeah, every championship ever has had holes in it. No one's ever played every other team at full strength. It's the best team. Like, it's just the way it goes. And like I said, after you win the title and move on, nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about the teams you didn't play along the way.
Exactly.
So, all right, excellent. I don't know, anything else you really want to get into? I think we'll obviously the playoffs will start for the Celtics on Saturday. Hopefully at some point we can get back together, dig in a little more when we know the matchup for certain. We kind of just discussed on the surface what a Hawks or Heat series would look like to an extent. Once it's finalized, hopefully we can link back up, kind of continue to analyze and preview the playoffs as they unfold. Hopefully can be with you a lot more as that goes along. But anything else in terms of kind of what we know now and what's right in front of us with the next upcoming week with the play-in and as we get ready for a first-round matchup that needs to be dug into here?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty in depth, that episode, and I think we're in good position to make a deep run and very excited for the playoffs.
Yeah, likewise.
Not just the Celtics either.
No, it should be great.
Should be a good playoffs
it
overall.
really should on both sides. A lot of good matchups. Especially those second rounds should be awesome. But all of it, I just can't wait to have great basketball every night. Last night was tough. I was watching a lot of MLB games. It was weird.
Poor guy.
Yeah, it's really tough. All right. Before we get out of here, do you care to address the rumor that you will be choosing to golf on Saturday instead of watching Game 1 of the playoffs?
I haven't heard that one. Who is your source?
I heard it from it was at _Nick Pereno was the via Nick Pereno. He said he had a tee time that conflicted with the Celtics.
I have a tee time. I didn't say I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be golfing instead of watching the Celtics. I just said I have a tee time. Okay. I have a lot of tee times. That doesn't mean I'm going to be golfing at those tee times at all times. Also, how do you know I'm not playing 9?
How do I know what?
How do you know I'm not playing 9? And I'll be back by tip-off.
I just asked if you wanted to address the rumors. You're getting very defensive. I know very little.
No defense on my end. I'm very comfortable with my decisions and my path to being available for tip-off of the Celtics this Saturday.
Wow. Spoken very, very poignantly.
like a lawyer.
Yeah, really dancing around the question there. Interesting. So I guess we'll have to keep posted on that one and see how Saturday plays out. Very interesting.
Yes, exactly. Stay tuned.
Yes, excellent. And then one thing I feel like we have to at least touch on because everyone in the world has put their opinion out there. Where do you stand on this MVP race as the season is now over? You've heard every variation of every argument for and against these top 3 guys, Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. At this point, I think, fair or not, it seems like the narrative has totally shifted towards Embiid, and he is seemingly going to finally win this award. But what about you? I haven't gotten my vote yet, so I don't have an official ballot. But what would your vote be? And I'll kind of let you know where I stand. Not that it really matters,
So
but you gotta have a take.
I do think, for better or worse, I think it should be Embiid. Not that he's the best player. Like, if I was starting a franchise with, between him, Jokic, and Giannis, I'm not saying Embiid would be my first pick, but I just think the way this season played out, how he played. I mean, he had, a career year for a guy that's been in the MVP race the last few years. I think it's his time. I think voter fatigue is real,
Well, I think
and
it is real, but
I kind of
I'm
I
not
think
talking voter fatigue. I'm saying, what do you think? Who would you give it to? Who's the Nick Moreno's MVP?
I'm giving it to Embiid. I think he deserves it. He was unbelievable, and that team is solid, but I think he is the Sixers. He, obviously without him they're nothing, but like, they don't have a loaded roster. Harden's good, but he's kind of a, you know not a shell of himself, but he's not the big player, the guy he used to be. And I think Embiid's elevated a good roster into being a real contender. Um, and I think this is probably one of the few times you could say that Philly's been, I think, an actual real contender. The last since in the Embiid, tenure there. And I think I think he's been incredible. I think he deserves it. Um, and he works hard. He was relatively healthy. I think it's, I think it's his time.
All right, fair enough. Hey, there is no wrong answer to this question. I mean, you can make a great case for all three guys, so that's totally fair. I've thought about it a lot. I've waffled. I was actually on Team Giannis until very recently. I kind of thought everyone's kind of just dismissing him, whereas
Mm.
I think everyone would kind of agree he is the best player in the league. And he's been on the team that everyone would agree has been the best team in the league. The numbers back it up. He's the best defender out of the three. However, I kind of switched at the very end to back where it all started, and that's Jokic. I just
Well,
think that once you kind of look past all the narratives against him and stuff, like, he's had another unbelievable season. The advanced stats are beyond off the charts. He's gotten more efficient on lower usage and still makes the biggest impact. I mean, they have a historically amazing offense. The offense is still amazing when Porter sits, when Murray sits, even when Gordon sits, when all of them sits. Like, it's just hard to even quantify what he does, and I just think his overall impact is the biggest. Like, I think if you actually take one guy's value to their team in this regular season that just happened, his is actually the highest. I know people have issue with his defense. It's not as good as the other guys. That's fair, but I think his offense is almost so amazing that it still helps their defense, and that's reflected in the numbers. And I think people get pissed off when they say, people just use the advanced stats to make it seem like he's a good defender where he's not, and maybe by the eye test and whatever he's not. But the fact is that just like scoring means the other team is taking the ball out of the hoop and has to set up the half court, which is, objectively less efficient offense. Not turning the ball over means the other team isn't having easy baskets in transition. Like, having such a good offense at a certain point is good defense because it's like limiting the other team's offense. I just think his overall impact was slightly higher than the other two guys. The Nuggets got the number one seed. He's really only kind of rested a bit recently because he's not trying for this MVP and they just care about the playoffs. They've had the number one seed locked up, but I think I kind of think that so much of this, unfortunately, is boiling down to the narrative, whether fair or not, that people just don't think he deserves to be a three-time MVP. I think if you take that out of the question, I don't know that people would be saying he doesn't deserve to be MVP this year, because I think his season is just as good, if not better, than it's been in past years when he's won, and his team is clearly better. So it's like, there's really no knock on the guy other than that you just think it might look bad in 20 years that we gave this guy 3 straight MVPs and he might not win a championship or like whatever. But if you just look at this regular season on its own merit, I've again come to the conclusion that he was the most valuable player. He's not going to win it. It's fine. I actually took out a nice bet on Embiid, so I'm happy that he's going to win it. But if I had a vote, I would vote for Jokic.
That's fair. I mean, like you said, no wrong answers here.
Yeah, I think that's really the main takeaway. All right, anything else before we get out of here and enjoy these play-in games tonight? Root on the Atlanta Hawks.
I'm ready to go.
All right, excellent. Well, as always, thank you for joining us, Chuddy Heads. Hopefully we'll be back a lot more frequently now that the good stuff's starting. Stay tuned for more. Tonight, go Hawks, but in general, go Seas.
Go Seas.
Strip the bolts on them. Should've never sent him to pick up the work for me. Sprayed the park and had my shit inside the car. Marcus Smart boy was shooting with a 36 on him. Said if he wasn't in the rush, they was all goners. Tech cursive on the Jets, he was gonna Sean John them. They was sleeping on the guard, then it dawned on